Subliminal learning. Watch this video to learn about software development by associating familiar concepts with this topic. For example, in this video, data is represented by people. So whenever you see people in this video, you'll know it's in reference to data. Data, information or facts that are stored, processed, or transmitted by a computer. For example, in a social media application, user profiles, posts, and comments are all forms of data. Data types. Categories of data with predefined characteristics, such as integers, strings, floats, or booleans, used to specify the kind of values that variables can hold. For instance, in Python, int, str, float, and bool are commonly used data types. Data table, a structured arrangement of data in rows and columns, similar to a spreadsheet, used to organize and represent data in a tabular format. In a retail application, a data table might represent inventory with columns like item ID, name, quantity, and price. Database, a structured collection of data that is organized and managed to enable efficient retrieval, storage, and manipulation. Examples include MySQL, PostgreSQL, and MongoDB. Database schema, a blueprint that defines the structure, organization, and relationships of data within a database. In a blogging platform, the schema might include tables for users, posts, comments, and their respective relationships. Data columns and rows. Columns represent the attributes or fields of the data, while rows contain individual records or instances of data. For instance, in a student database, columns could include student ID, name, and grade, while each row represents a unique student. Create data table, the process of defining and initializing a new table within a database, specifying its columns, data types, and constraints. In SQL, a create table statement might look like: create table students, ID int, name varchar 50, age int. Drop data table, the action of removing a table from a database, permanently deleting its structure and data. Using SQL, you can drop a table with the command drop table students. Data query, a request made to a database or data source to retrieve specific information based on defined criteria. For example, in SQL, a data query might be select from customers where, country, USA. Array, a data structure that stores a collection of elements, typically of the same type, identified by a numeric index. In JavaScript, an array can be created like this. Let numbers be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Configuration, settings or parameters that determine the behavior or functionality of software or systems. For instance, configuring a web server involves specifying options such as port number, document root, and access controls. Data encryption. the process of encoding data in such a way that only authorized parties can access it, typically using algorithms and keys. Encrypting sensitive information like passwords or credit card numbers ensures security during transmission or storage. Data binding, the process of connecting the presentation layer of an application, such as UI elements, to the data model, ensuring that changes in one are automatically reflected in the other. In AngularJS, data binding can be achieved using directives like ngModel. Data deletion, the removal of data from a storage device or database, either temporarily or permanently. Deleting a record from a database table involves removing it from the data set, often using a SQL statement like delete from customers where customer EA1. Variable, a named storage location in a program's memory that holds data and can be referenced or manipulated. For example, in Python, x5 assigns the value 5 to the variable x. Function, a reusable block of code that performs a specific task and can be invoked, called, from elsewhere in the program. In JavaScript, a function to calculate the square of a number could be defined as function square x, return x, x dies. Function arguments, values passed to a function when it is called, providing input for the function's operation. In Python, a function to add two numbers might be defined as def add x, y, return x plus y, where x and y are function arguments. Function return value, the result or output of a function's execution, typically produced by the return statement. For example, in Java, a function to find the maximum of two numbers might be defined as a function which returns the highest numerical value. Function control logic, conditional statements and control flow mechanisms within a function that determine the execution path based on certain conditions. For example, using if, else if, and else statements in a function to handle different cases or scenarios. Function control loops, iterative control structures within a function that execute a block of code repeatedly until a certain condition is met. In Python, a for loop within a function can be used to iterate over a sequence of elements and perform a specific task. Asynchronous function, a function that operates independently of the main program flow, allowing other tasks to continue while it performs its operation. In JavaScript, asynchronous functions are commonly used with async and await keywords to handle asynchronous operations like fetching data from a server. Program threads, independent sequences of execution within a program that can run concurrently, enabling parallel processing of tasks. In Java, threads are created using the thread class or implementing the runnable interface. Program runtime errors, errors that occur while a program is executing, typically due to invalid input, unexpected conditions, or programming mistakes. Examples include division by zero, accessing an out-of-bounds array index, or attempting to use a variable before it's initialized. Runtime error handling, the process of detecting, diagnosing, and recovering from runtime errors to prevent program termination or unexpected behavior. This often involves using try-catch blocks or exception handling mechanisms to gracefully handle errors and provide meaningful feedback to the user. Stack overflow. Error. A runtime error that occurs when the call stack of a program exceeds its maximum size, usually due to excessive recursion or deeply nested function calls. This can happen, for example, when a recursive function lacks a base case or when dealing with very large data sets. Classes. Blueprint for creating objects that encapsulate data and behavior. For instance, in Python, a car class could have attributes like make and model, along with methods like start, engine, and drive. Private variable. A variable accessible only within the class that defines it, not from outside the class. In Python, private variables are conventionally prefixed with an underscore, like count, indicating they shouldn't be accessed directly from outside the class. Public variable, a variable accessible from outside the class that defines it. In many programming languages like Python or JavaScript, variables declared within a class without any access specifier are by default public. Import statement, a statement used to bring functionality from other modules or packages into the current scope of a program. In Python, import math brings in the math module, allowing access to its functions like math, sqrt. Override function. Replacing or modifying the implementation of a method inherited from a superclass in a subclass. In Java, you can override a method by defining a method in the subclass with the same signature as the superclass method. Event listener. A function or callback that listens for and responds to events triggered by user interactions or system notifications. In JavaScript, you can attach event listeners to DOM elements to handle events like clicks or key presses. Typecasting. Converting the data type of an object into another data type. For instance, in Python, int 10 converts the string 10 into an integer. Device API request, making a request to access hardware or device-specific features, such as camera, GPS, or accelerometer, usually through a specialized API provided by the operating system or platform. Network API request, making a request to a remote server or service over a network to fetch or send data, typically using protocols like HTTP or HTTPS. In web development, this is commonly done using technologies like XML HTTP request or fetch API in JavaScript. Request payload. The data sent along with the request to a server, typically in the form of parameters, JSON, or XML. For example, in an HTTP POST request, the request payload contains the data to be sent to the server for processing. Data cache. a temporary storage mechanism used to store frequently accessed data in order to reduce data retrieval time and improve performance. For example, web browsers often use a cache to store images, scripts, and other resources locally to speed up page loading. Developer, a person who writes, tests, and maintains the code base of software applications, often collaborating with designers, product managers, and other stakeholders to create functional and user-friendly products. Developer tools, software applications or features provided to developers to assist in writing, debugging, and optimizing code. Examples include integrated development environments, IDEs, text editors, and browser developer tools like Chrome DevTools. Command prompt, a text-based interface used to execute commands and interact with a computer's operating system. In Windows, the command prompt provides a command line interface, CLI, for tasks such as file management and system configuration. Event logging, the process of recording events, errors, and activities occurring within a software application or system for analysis, debugging, and monitoring purposes. Event logs often contain timestamps, severity levels, and additional metadata to aid in troubleshooting. Unit testing, a software testing technique where individual units or components of a program are tested in isolation to ensure they behave as expected. Developers write test cases to verify the correctness of functions, methods, or classes. Debugging, the process of identifying, diagnosing, and fixing errors or bugs in a software application to ensure it behaves as intended. Debugging techniques include logging, stepping through code, and using debugging tools provided by IDEs. Breakpoint, a marker set in the code by a developer to pause program execution at a specific line or instruction during debugging. Breakpoints allow developers to inspect the program state, variables, and execution flow at that point. Debug stepover, a debugging command that executes the current line of code and advances to the next line in the program without stepping into function or method calls. It's useful for quickly moving through code blocks during debugging. Debug step in 2, a debugging command that steps into the execution of a function or method call, allowing developers to inspect the code within that function or method during debugging. Debug pause, a command or action that temporarily suspends program execution during debugging, allowing developers to inspect and analyze the program state at a specific point in time. Syntax, the set of rules and principles that govern the structure and composition of statements in a programming language. Syntax errors occur when code violates these rules, resulting in compilation or interpretation failures. User, an individual who interacts with a software application, system, or service to perform tasks, access information, or achieve specific goals. User experience, UX. The overall experience and satisfaction a user derives from interacting with a product or service, encompassing factors such as usability, accessibility, and aesthetics. User authorization, the process of granting or denying access to specific resources or functionalities within a system based on the user's identity, roles, and permissions. User authorization ensures that authenticated users can only access the resources they are authorized to use according to predefined rules and policies. User access token, a token or credential granted to a user after successful authentication, used to authorize access to protected resources or perform actions on behalf of the user within an application or system. Role-based access control, RBAC, a security model that restricts access to system resources based on the roles assigned to users, defining what actions users are allowed to perform based on their roles and permissions. Device permissions, settings or permissions granted by a user to a device or application to access specific device features or resources, such as camera, microphone, location, or contacts. Dev testing environment. A dedicated environment used by developers for testing software applications during the development process. It simulates the production environment, but allows developers to experiment, debug, and test new features without impacting the live system. Staging environment, an environment that closely resembles the production environment where software applications are tested, validated, and prepared for deployment before being released to production. Staging environments help identify and mitigate issues before they impact end users. Production environment, the live or operational environment where software applications or services are deployed and accessed by end users. Production environments are optimized for performance, scalability, and reliability to ensure smooth operation of applications in a real-world setting. App uninstall, the process of removing or deleting a software application from a device, typically initiated by the user through the device's operating system or application management interface. Uninstalling an app removes its files, settings, and associated data from the device. We hope this technique has helped with your understanding of software development. Thank you from Koi's Games.